الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. My dear brothers and sisters, crises are part of human life. They come in different shapes and forms. They could be economical, they could be social, they could be political, and they could be health related. But the fact remains, regardless of the shape and the form they take, that part of the reality of our existence in this universe is to face crisis and to face challenges. And this is a fact that we have been reminded about more than once in the Book of Allah, in the Quran. Crisis might not be avoidable always, but it is possible with the will of Allah and with good effort and good management to mitigate and to minimize the negative consequences of the crisis that we face in this life. We find sometimes situations where the same crisis could be faced by two communities that have the same circumstances and have the same resources, yet you find one community suffering more than the other one. And one possible reason for this is how effective each community is in managing its crisis and its challenges. Good communities are more effective in planning, in preparing, and also in managing crises when they occur and when they happen. And one of the signs of good leadership is to be effective and to be clever in managing crisis and minimizing the damage that could arise. Our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a prophet. He was also a leader. Many historians, even non-Muslims, would acknowledge the unique leadership qualities of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we can today, as we go through the crisis that we are facing, we can learn a lot from the leadership of the Prophet in managing crisis and in managing challenges. During the life of the Prophet, he, at a personal level, faced many challenges. And as a leader of the community, he also oversaw many challenges that confronted the evolving Muslim community, whether in Mecca or in Medina. So today, I'd like to share with you one particular challenge, one particular crisis that happened at the time of the Prophet. And this was one of the most challenging crises they had to go through as a community. This happened 5 years after the migration of the Prophet and his companions from Mecca to Medina. And this happened in an incident known in history as Ghazwatul Khandaq, the Battle of the Trench. And what happened in this incident was that the Meccans established or created a coalition with many other tribes in Arabia. And they managed to pull together a huge army by the standard of Arabia at that time, 10,000 men, well armed, well equipped, and well financed. And the plan was to invade Medina and to eradicate Islam and Muslims forever. All the attempts they have made in the past have failed. But this time, they have mastered every resource they can have, and they have pulled together a very formidable force. And they decided to march towards Medina. And the Prophet, as a good leader, he was always diligent, and his eyes and his ears were open, knowing the danger that was facing the evolving small community in Medina. He was always watchful on what was happening in the surrounding. So as soon as he received the news of this huge army that left Mecca and was heading towards Medina, he took some very important steps to manage this dangerous crisis. And I'd like to share 4 important aspects of the management of the crisis that were taken by the beloved Prophet and his companions. So the first one of these 4 is consultation, shura. So the minute he received the news of this huge army that was coming towards Medina, he called for a meeting, and the companions came, and they started deliberating and discussing what was the best course of action to address this crisis. It was a crisis that they have never faced anything similar to that in any of the challenges they faced before. So after some deliberations and different opinions, one companion known as Salman al-Farisi, Salman the Persian, gave a suggestion. And Salman had a different background. He came from Persia. Originally, he was a Christian. So he had an experience that many other companions did not have. And based on what he had seen back in Persia, he suggested to Muslims, to the Prophet, that they should dig a trench around Medina that will prevent the enemy. The city of Medina was naturally protected from most of its surrounding. But there was one particular area where the city was open and any army can easily come and invade. So they decided to dig a huge and a long trench. And the Prophet liked the idea, and the companions also supported the idea. Now the challenge they have was they only have a short period of time. Within less than a week, this huge army was expected to arrive in Medina. So they diligently, day after day, the whole community started digging and digging and digging, and successfully they were able to accomplish what they aimed before the arrival of this huge army. The Meccans and the other tribes, the Confederates, they all were confident that nobody can stop them. This will be the final blow to Islam and Muslims. As soon as they arrived in Medina, then they were completely bewildered. They were frozen. They didn't know what to do. Arabs have never seen something like this. A trench in front of them. And they realize that there is no way that they can cross this trench. And Muslims were on the other side of the trench, diligently watching and ensuring that nothing or nobody will try to infiltrate in any way or shape or form. So here, my dear brothers and sisters, we see the first step the Prophet took to manage this crisis, and that is shura, consultation. And this was a method the Prophet followed in every crisis and in every situation. He was commanded in the Quran, وَشَاوِرُهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, consult with them on the matter. And accordingly, as Abu Huraira mentioned, he was the most to consult, even on his personal family matters. And in the Quran describing the community of believers, the verse says, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ, that they conduct their affairs on the basis of shura and on the basis of consultation. So consultation is very important, and that's the first step in effective management of challenges and crises. There is no guarantee that the decision made with consultation will be always correct. It could be wrong. But the likelihood of making a wrong decision is much smaller when we go through a true process of shura and consultation. And it's mentioned the hadith, مَا تَشَاوَرَ قَوْمٌ إِلَّا هُدُوا لِأَرْشَدِ أَمْرِهِمْ. No group of people will engage in consultation except that Allah will guide them to the best of their affairs. So my dear brothers and sisters, it's important that we practice this example of the Prophet and consult among ourselves, consult the experts, consult the people who have the knowledge, consult among ourselves. And when we consult, we look at an issue from different angles. It was a consultation process that they went through that brought this wonderful, amazing idea of Salman al-Farisi. And consultation is a two-way process. One, those who are part of the consultative process, they have the right to express their opinion. They have the right to be listened to. But they also have a duty to support a duly made decision through the process of Ashura. So first important element of crisis management is consultation. The second element of effective crisis management is maintaining calm. During crisis, people become panicky. They become fearful. And when people become panicky, they cannot think rationally. They act in irrational way. They make decisions that might harm them in the long run. Maintaining calm is critical and important. And that was a method of the Prophet ﷺ. When crisis happen, there are always rumors. When crisis happen, people project their fears and their worries, and they come up with different stories that create more fear and more panic. And to give you an example of what happened in this crisis, Muslims were surrounded from every angle for about almost a month. It was cold and there was shortage of food and people were in a dire situation. In fact, the Quranic verse describes their situation in Surah Al-Ahzab. إِذْ جَاءُوكُم مِّن فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ وَإِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارُ وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرَ. So the verse describes how they were surrounded from up, from down, from every angle, and how their eyes were dim from fear, and how they felt that they were on the verge of death. It was a very, very difficult situation. Now, to make things worse, the Prophet heard of secret negotiations between this invading army and a tribe that was within the confines of Medina, known as Banu Qurayza. This tribe had a peaceful coexistence agreement with Muslims. It was a non-Muslim tribe known as Banu Qurayza, and Muslims never expected that this tribe would betray them because they had a peaceful coexistence agreement. However, this tribe secretly met with this invading army, and they were convinced to betray Muslims and attack them from their back. Now, when the Prophet heard about this secret negotiation that was going between the two parties, he decided to send a delegation of men who had a pre-Islamic relationship with this particular tribe. They were their partners, or they had a coalition relationship with them. So he decided to send them to verify and to affirm the truthfulness of the news that he received. But he told them something very important. He told them, if the news you will bring is negative, meaning that they have indeed betrayed us, then do not say that to me in public. He told them to use some kind of a code word. But he told them, if the news is positive, meaning that they are still truthful to their covenant, to their agreement, then say it to me in public. So this delegation went to Banu Qurayza, and they discovered that Banu Qurayza have already forsaken Muslims, and that they have joined the coalition, and that they were preparing themselves to attack Muslims. So they came to the Prophet ﷺ, and they simply used a code word, Adal wal Qara. These were two tribes that betrayed Muslims before and killed many innocent companions. So now this frightening news have been confirmed. But the Prophet ﷺ did not want them to say it publicly so that people would not be panicking, because this kind of news will be extremely devastating to the people. And there were hypocrites within Medina who would take this kind of news and spread it around and create more fear and more panic. So it's important when crises happen, either at the leadership level or at the individual level, not to panic. It's important to maintain our calm. When we are calm, we can think straight. When we are calm, we can see things more clearly. So maintaining calm is an important element in managing crisis, and that is another important lesson we learn from the leadership of our beloved Prophet. May the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. Third one, during times of crisis, people tend to be pessimistic. People tend to be negative. People think of the worst scenarios and worst outcomes. And here, it's important for a leader to create some sense of positivity, create optimism. And that's something we see in the example of the Prophet ﷺ. At this difficult, very difficult moment, at this time when hypocrites were saying that's it, that's the end of Islam and Muslims, a Prophet was telling his companions, telling the people in Medina, there is something greater awaiting for you. This crisis will end. Not only this crisis will end, but you will be the masters of the world. You will spread the word of truth and the word of Islam to the land of Persia, to the land of the Byzantines. And the Prophet ﷺ, as he was telling them this, there were the weaker elements, those who were in the margin, the hypocrites, telling people or mocking and saying that how would it be possible that he promises that we will be the masters of the world when we cannot even safely go to the washrooms. So the Prophet, may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, at this moment of despair, at this moment of fear, at this moment of panic, he was encouraging people to think beyond the crisis in front of them, to think optimistically, giving them from the knowledge that was given to him of the great days to come. And that sense of positivity is certainly important. When people are positive, they are more willing to work hard. When they are positive, their self-esteem will be at a higher level. When they become negative, they withdraw, they become pessimistic, and so on and so forth. So let's, my dear brothers and sisters, always be hopeful. Let's always be optimistic. Let's always remember that for every challenge, there is some good aspects. And today we hear about the challenges that we are facing. Definitely, it's challenging. But there is also other aspects that people might overlook. The fact that those who come out of this situation, or the fact that those who are cured of this disease is much higher than those who die because of this disease, or the fact that the disease now is starting to gradually decline in countries like China and so on and so forth. These are positive stories, and so on and so forth. The point is, my dear brothers and sisters, let's not focus on the negatives, on the challenge, but also look at the other side. look at the positive side, and be optimist. And that's something we learn from the Prophet ﷺ in managing crisis, to be optimistic, to be hopeful, and not to look only on the negative side, but also to look at the positive side. Fourth, my dear brothers and sisters, at times of crisis, there are people who need help. The weaker in society, the ones who are often forgotten. We read the Quran, across the Quran, we find verses that talk about the yatim. The yatim, the weakest element in society, the orphan. So part of managing crisis is always to keep in mind the well-being of everyone, but particularly the well-being of those who cannot defend themselves. During this crisis in Medina, the men were at the front line, defending or standing on the other side of the trench. And children and men and elderly were left behind. But they were not left alone. Prophet ﷺ made sure that there were men available to defend them and to look after them and provide for their needs. So part of the strategy of managing crisis is also to look after the weakest and those who are in need. We have many elders in our community. We have many students who are stranded. We have many people who lost their livelihood, and so on and so forth. And it's important that as a caring Muslim community, we remember every part and every segment of our community and go beyond thinking about ourselves and care about everyone. My dear brothers and sisters, before I conclude, I'd like to remind you something very important. Our Islam is a faith of reason, is a faith of common sense. In the chapters of Usul al-Fiqh, the fundamentals of Islamic jurisprudence, there is something called Maqasid al-Sharia, the objectives of Islamic injunctions or Islamic Sharia. And what we learn when we go through this chapter, or these chapters, is that one of the primary objectives of Islam is to safeguard human life. And accordingly, it is forbidden in Islam to put ourselves or put other people in harm's way. And sometimes when we understand our faith in a very ritualistic way, we tend to forget these objectives of Islamic injunctions. And let me give you an example, my dear brothers and sisters. A few years ago, there was an earthquake in Indonesia. And apparently, and I'm speaking based on what was spread in the social media, there was a video clip that people were sharing and spreading around of an imam who was leading a congregation. And as they were leading the congregation, the earthquake started. And naturally, when earthquake happens, people have to leave their buildings as soon as possible so that they would not be crushed under the rubble. But this imam continued praying. And the video clip shows him shaking while he was praying. And people were commenting and saying, what a courageous imam. What an imam who really cares about his prayer. An imam who has yaqeen, an imam who has iman, and so on and so forth. But my dear brothers and sisters, and I'm commenting based on what was on that clip and what people were saying. If that's true, Islamically, this is not an act of courage. This is not an act of iman. This is not an act of yaqeen. This is an act of recklessness. Prayer, of course, is important, but when there is a dangerous situation, not only it is acceptable or permissible to continue praying, but you must stop the prayer and find safety and continue your prayer later. In the books of fiqh, you will find a chapter that talks about cutting prayer when there is danger. So my dear brothers and sisters, it's important as we go through this crisis to understand that Islam is a deen, a faith of reason, a faith of common sense, a faith that teaches us to be professional, to consult people of knowledge and people of expertise, and not to take things in our hands and take a ritualistic approach to our faith and to the practice of our deen. Ask the Almighty to save us, to protect us, protect our loved ones, our families, and protect humanity. And we ask Him to give speedy recovery to those who are suffering. And we ask Him to bless and to shower those who passed away. Thank you very much for listening to me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.